troubleshooting. We're talking about everyday issues in the brewery that people face, that brewers face, and then we're talking about the technical challenges while brewing with yeast, water chemistry, and malt. So could I have Mr. Manu Misra on stage, please? Okay, the session's going to be moderated by Manu Mishra. Could I get our panelists on stage? Could I have Mr. Vignesh Muralidharan, head brewer of Walt? Could I have Ms. Kajal Machanda, head brewer of By the People? And can I have Umang Nair from Master Brewer from S Brewing? And can I have Rohit Parvani on stage as well, please? Uh, Once again,
No
this is going to be
designation
our
needed.
last. Oh, sorry, Rohit Parvani is the head brewer of the beer club.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
Okay, let's just start.
Good evening, everyone. Yes? No? A little bit of energy? No? Tired? Okay, so we're going to do this panel, which is essentially on troubleshooting issues in the brewery. And basically, we've got our panelists today who are going to talk about issues that they faced, challenges they may have faced with their raw materials and how they overcame them. So thank you guys for joining us on this panel. Basically, using a wide variety of processes and ingredients is a part and parcel of being a craft brewer in our country today, especially when you take into account the sheer diversity in beer styles and the hundreds of permutations and combinations that brewers create. Our panel today will cover broad areas of the brewing process and rely on the experiences of our panelists to highlight issues that they may have faced and the ways in which they could troubleshoot these issues and move beyond them. So getting right into it, I'd like to ask you a very open question about one of the fundamental ingredients that all of us use. What have been your experiences with the viability of dry yeast versus liquid yeast? And have you had any issues with using either or? Is there a preference? We can start with Rohit. I think you have a mic there.
Sure. Right. So I personally prefer using dried yeast. We don't have a cycle of beer where we can reuse the yeast 2 times in a row. We do a lot of rotation of our beers. So for us, straight out the bat, liquid yeast becomes very impractical. We've used it the one time, but then because we couldn't crop it and reuse it again, it seemed very impractical. So we stick to dried yeast, easy to use once. Want to use it again, do it, otherwise it's chill.
Have you ever had any issues with the dry yeast you use?
No, not so far in the last 10 years. There might have been the odd batch of yeast that produces the sulfur, but it does get reabsorbed a little later. So touch wood, we've not had any major issues that we couldn't sort out.
You can name drop your supplier if you've had no issues in 10 years.
No, I'm
Kajal, what about you?
I would also prefer dry yeast over liquid yeast because I mean the storage is easy. It doesn't give too much complication when it comes to beer, and for propagation or the storage of liquid yeast is really difficult. And as a microbrewery setup, we don't have that much, a lab setup or something that we can do that. So I would always prefer dry yeast over liquid yeast.
And any issues you may have ever faced?
No, not with the dry yeast.
This is amazing. Omang, you want to chime in?
So let's start. Just to add to whatever both of them said, so I think getting liquid yeast is very difficult for us. In general, getting it in India. So using dry yeast is, you can store it very well. It's easy to use. I have, in fact, I repitch a lot, couple of generations. So one thing that we need to take care of in terms of like issues that I've had is contamination. So I've had that before. So just to take care of that, we need to be very, very clear about how we store it. We have a separate container where we sanitize it and keep it for some time. And we store it for not more than 5-6 days. If it goes more than 5-6 days, because we don't have a lab setup as well, we dump it. So And having issues with dry yeast by itself, I've had no issues yet.
Just to add to something you said, do you have a lab for self-propagation in any of the breweries that you're brewing at?
No, not as of now, but we're in process to do that. So if that ever happens, that will kind of increase the number of generations that we're using, and we've got like control over what we're putting in.
Vignesh?
We use dry yeast as well, and we repitch as well. I have had the same problem Rohit had with sulfur, and that usually starts showing up after the third generation. Um, so yeah, and I prefer dry yeast because it's just much easier to use. Probably one issue I faced while repitching was, as you know, it's like lag, growth, fermentation, and autolysis. I made the mistake of actually taking yeast towards the end of fermentation, which results in very slow and stuck fermentation. So if you can probably pitch on like the second or third day, then it's like perfect. After fermentation, that is like in the growth phase. Sorry, the fermentation phase.
Right.
One, I'll just add on to that. So in dry yeast as well, so I, the manufacturers might probably kill me, but they have a certain grams per liter that you have to put in, right? I've experimented with a number of grams per liter, and I found that even if you under pitch it slightly, it still works. In dry yeast, the moment we get into liquid, we have to have like a good cell count, vitality of the.
When you say under pitch, could you give us an estimation in
So
percentage?
for a 1,000 liter system, for a 1,000 liter batch, I put in around 350 grams, 300 grams, versus a 500 which they recommend. And it's work. I haven't had any issues as yet. I've gone lower, and they're not going to supply yeast anymore. so yeah.
Thanks. I'm going to stay with Vignesh for the next question. It's around hops. We have a limited annual cultivation around the world. And I wanted to ask how easy it is to get the hops that you're looking out for. And when you do your recipes, do you plan your recipes around the availability of hops, or is it the other way around? Also, what is the best practice in the storage of hops that you follow?
In my opinion, as of today, I think all our suppliers here in India have enough options to create pretty much any recipe you would like. Maybe like things like cryo hops and stuff like that might not be available, but more or less you have pretty much all the hops you need while designing a recipe. I do design the recipe first and then look out for the hops I need. And as far as storage goes, it's basically the pack and a lot of cling wrap, taking it back and putting it back in your freezer as soon as you use it. And basically just taking all the oxygen out and cling wrapping it and putting it back. It's worked for us so far.
Right. In case, just an add-on, in case you don't get a particular hop that you're looking for, how easy is it to get alternatives?
So we have a lot of websites that can help us with that. So pretty much my first intuition or whatever it is to go online and check for the substitutions. Basically, we're going to look for the flavor profile, similar acid content and all that stuff. So that's how I do it. I pretty much refer online. If I can get a substitute, well and good. If I don't, and I change the recipe altogether.
So yeah, I also design recipe and then look for the hops. And as he said, we have a lot of options today in India for the hops, and we can choose from them. We have a lot of suppliers also. If one hop is not available with one supplier, we can go for another one. For the storage, yeah, that's because we don't have vacuum sealing or anything at our place. So we make sure that whenever we are closing an open bag that we are going to reuse, and sometime it has to be airtight somehow. I mean, as much as we can manually, because we don't have the option to vacuum closing it. And we keep it at at a colder temperature, so that it doesn't get, because of, if it's properly packed and it's at good temperature, it won't go bad or it won't oxidize.
Umang, I remember you doing a lot of stuff with cryo hops, so you want to
Yeah.
add in?
Recently. Just to add on to these guys, I have recently started using a vacuum sealer. and it really helps. It really helps because IPAs don't sell as much, and keeping those hops and they getting oxidized just ruins the whole beer. And again, if you're talking about cryo hops, the reason I got it is because we have the vacuum sealer. Otherwise, it's super expensive, and if something goes wrong with that, then we just lose a lot of money. So, yeah. So, so in terms of recipe creation, I kind of what is face doing? So in terms of recipe creation, I plan the beer initially uh, with, for example, if I'm using Citra or your C hops, Citra or Cascade. If I don't get a hop, then there's no other option but to change the hop, which has similar um, properties. So all in all, I don't think hops, we have an, we have a dearth of hops. Like there's so much. So we haven't had issues as yet, and the amount we're using isn't that much in terms of quantity versus the US, for example, where they have contracts. We don't have contracts, but we are good for now.
And just to add, like for one-off beers, I try to order from like homebrew stores online, so that as he said, we're not going to be brewing that anytime soon again. So I don't want to keep a whole bag going to waste in the freezer. So we just like order small quantities.
I have nothing further to add. Everything was so eloquently said by all the panelists about the hops.
So, Rohit, maybe you can help me with this one. We're talking about malt, and we're talking about tips and tricks on storage of malts to ensure minimum disruption by pests and insects. And you can't say I use my interns to clean the place.
Look, you have to be careful how you store them either way. We have a warehouse that we try to maintain in dry conditions, as less moisture as possible. It doesn't always work out to exactly the specification that we're looking for, but as long as we're using the malt within 3 weeks, we thankfully have a local supplier now. We buy 2 weeks worth of malt at a time, 3 weeks at the max. That said, though, we still maintain proper clean conditions as much as we can in our warehouse. If we do find that some malt has molded or forming clumps inside for whatever reason, if it's unopened, then that's a cause of concern for us, whether it's a supply chain issue, whether it's something to do with where we're storing it. We haven't had that issue now in the last 6-7 months, but over the last few years, we've had some issues like that where we had to discard the entire batch. Yeah, especially during COVID, actually. We had a bunch of malts that got a bit spoiled, a few insects. So we had to discard that, and then, of course, fumigate the place, sanitize the whole damn thing again.
So when you say that you are looking at 2 weeks of malt as one individual order, do you lose any economies of scale in that
No, not really.
smaller?
The only thing we have to pay a little extra for is transport. It doesn't really factor into the cost as much.
Moving down the panel.
Yes, for the storage, one thing that is very essential is not to keep the malt on the ground or near the walls, because then it will, absorb a lot of moisture and that's gonna spoil your malt. So yeah, that's the one of the thing that everyone should follow. So I was saying that for storing malts, we should always use pallets and keep it away from the walls. Not we should not keep the malts touching the walls, because then it absorbs moisture, and then the malt goes bad or the pest infestation happens. So that is one of the tip that everyone should follow.
I think that's really handy. Aman?
In terms of storage, I guess one thing that I look at, I've had issues with that as well. So if the brewery has a separate space where there's no like holes in the walls for rats to come in and like attack, and humidity.
Aman, this is a safe space. You
Safe
can say
space.
what you have to say.
I know. I'm just like so. And humidity is also a big factor. So during monsoons and all, we try and keep it rolling, like what he said, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Otherwise, we keep it for quite some time. So we prep our beers based on that as well, where like our special malts, we don't order as much, and we plan our beers according to that. We know that our wheat beers are going to sell the most, so we have Pilsner and wheat that we order initially and keep. versus the other special malts. So we, unless and until we have something that is in line for maybe the summer, so we order that and we have to make a couple of batches so that it doesn't rot there for, a while. Um, what was the other question on malt?
That was pretty much it on malt. That was pretty much it on malt. Thank you.
Same thing as what these guys said, clean and dry, that's the way to go. And I've also had the same issue with the malt bags touching the walls. So basically we use cardboard now to stop it. And one more thing I would like to add is to keep it fireproof, basically by just separating the malt storage area and the area where you're milling, because that's a big issue. In terms of it's very explosive, it's a fire hazard, so you want to keep the mill room and the storage room separate.
That's great. My next question is on water chemistry. We know that local water conditions are variable during the year, and I wanted to ask how that impacts your brewing process. Is it often that you get reports from the testing of the water you use? And the second part of the question is that is there any scope for sustainable sourcing like rainwater harvesting, considering the sheer size of the locations that you guys brew at?
Because we use RO water, so we don't face that much issue with the water. But yeah, because if there's, is there problem with the raw water, then our plants suffer, the RO plant. But when it comes to the brewing process, we don't suffer that much because we use RO water. About the testing, yes, we do testing, but like once a year only. I think we should do like more often, like in 3 months. But yeah, that's what we are looking for. Maybe in future we should do that. But for now, we just do it for once a year.
Anything on the sustainability side? Well, I can answer it for you, but I'd rather hear it from you.
We haven't decided anything on sustainability yet because the problem, at least all of us are like using RO water, I think. Like no one's using like normal water and then going through a carbon filter and then, except for I think boys from Maharashtra, right? So I try and send it for testing every couple of months, like 4 5 months, but because it's RO, the thing is we need to look at, I think one of the things that we can probably, like brewers can do is keep a pH meter on hand, a TDS meter on hand, just to understand if there are variations in the water itself. And the moment you see that, either there's a problem with the RO because we are not doing anything with the raw water. Yeah, so I guess testing every 4 months is great, but we never get to it. So, and sustainability, I don't know, like.
The thing is, most of us are, at least from what I've seen, we have breweries in already constructed buildings. It becomes very difficult to keep sustainability in mind. If you're starting a new place, then it makes sense for you to think about rainwater harvesting. When Beer Club had the second brewery, we had all these systems in place because we knew what it took at our first outlet. So we were able to make some small changes to be able to recycle the water and use it for other purposes and all of that. But by and large, I don't think it's quite a big consideration for us at the moment.
Is there any way it can be in the future? Because this is something that's going to come back year on year as we go forward.
I don't know how it would fit into currently existing plants. We do have a small mobile ETP that we have installed to be able to clean the water out. But then to be able to use that again by some detailed cleaning process, that's not going to be possible. We try and reduce our water consumption as much as possible, but that's as sustainable as it will be.
Same thing, just try to use water as judiciously as possible. We have a RO water as well. We have a college that's super nearby to our brewery which does our water testing. So because of that, it's just like a 5-minute walk away. We do it every month. And on top of that, we just check the TDS and all that before we brew every time from the hot liquor tank.
Cool. My last question to you guys is on the everyday issues that you may face while brewing in your respective breweries. What are some of the common day-to-day issues that you experience with your brewing equipment? And what is your advice to new brewers starting out at their first craft brewery?
I think all of us has faced this issue of frothing when it comes to beer. That's the biggest issue we brewers face. So yeah, this is something we always try to, work on as much as we can so that our beer is not frothing and it doesn't lose its carbonation.
I'm thinking of issues. I have no issues. No, I have way too many issues. Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking, bro, thinking. Um, like for new brewers to come into a craft brewery and start working, I, I've done this with most of my brewers who have come in. Like start cleaning the place. It is, yeah, I have to. Needs to be clean. So 90% of brewing is cleaning, right? So it needs to be a clean brewery. As soon the moment you attain that, like just you know in your head that you have to clean everything. Issues are only going to be mechanical. If not, uh, there are going to be issues of like which is directly going to affect the product. And getting out a bad product is not an easy task to, yeah.
Rohit?
Yeah, same. Beer I find is quite a robust beverage. It's not easy to go bad unless you're really bad as a brewer. For me, most of the issues that we face is mechanical. The pump stops working, chiller stops working suddenly, steam generators, for example. So it comes in handy to have a little bit of knowledge on these kind of things, unless you want to call someone separately and fix it every single time. So these kind of little things, if you know how to check the continuity of current, just check for a trip, which a lot of us don't do. So that those kind of simple things, and then you're sorted.
So one of the things that I've, at least the breweries that I'm at, is we have a checklist every morning that we check even like the chiller temperature and it needs to be sorted. Yeah, but that helps for new brewers to come. You're an experienced brewer. So you just look at it and see. So like a checklist with CO2 or O2, are the tanks there? Is it going to be like there's no water, RO water suddenly has disappeared? Do you have there's no water coming in, are the raw water not there, like for the next batch? So just plan everything, plan and schedule everything, Rohit. Teaching you something.
Vignesh?
I just want to add to what Rohit and Umang said. Basically, just keeping a checklist. Keeping spares help, like preventive maintenance, like pump seals, gaskets, so glycol for the chiller. Just having like a backup ready to use goes a long way because you don't want to have the conversation with your owner, telling that something's going real wrong and you don't know how to fix it. So it just helps to keep the anxiety levels low.
I want to add to one thing, like all the new brewers who come, they all want to do is to make beer, but they don't want to look on the other side of where they can face a lot of issues. So what Rohit said, I want to add to that, that yes, you should, understand the system before you go for the brewing process. It's very important to understand your equipment and if possible to, find the solution if something goes wrong for it.
Thank you, guys. We're going to open this up to the audience for any questions. No questions.
We never covered the excise issues. I think that is yeah, troubleshooting excise people coming into the brewery and asking questions like, hey, what is this, what is that? Where is all the books?
I think the best thing you can do is make sure all your documents are in order. Stay in constant touch with them to help them understand what they need so they can help us understand what we need. Of course, there are times when you're really busy and then they come at odd times of the day. It's just a case of communicating with them. All brewers pretty much gather all the data we need. It's a case of giving it to them in that particular format that they want. Sometimes what they want, they don't realize that it's exactly what we are noting down. But it's easier said than done. It's just a case of riding the storm.
Keep the books intact. That's all they need.
Books are one side of the thing, and then they'll start checking the level, PBTO, this much liter is gone.
Everything in place.
Yeah.
Everything should match.
Yep. No other option but to comply.
Any other questions?
What is the water consumption presently for making a 1 HL beer? How much water is required?
I think right now we are somewhere, including cleaning and process usage and all of that, We might be somewhere 1 to 5.6 or 7. 1 liter to 5.6 liters or 7 liters, I think, if I'm not wrong. Similar, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any others? I think you guys did a very effective job. And if you do have any other questions, you can catch the panelists for a beer at the guys' beer tent. And thank you so much for coming and
You're
sharing
welcome.
your experiences, guys. Thank you, Rohit, Kajal, Umang, and Vignesh. And thank you, everyone.
Sorry, could I have you all on stage for a minute? We'd like to take a picture and hand out some